I found the text message by accident. That's what I told myself afterward, though deep down, I knew I'd been looking for something. Kyle had been distant for months, his phone always face down on the table, his explanations for late nights growing increasingly elaborate. That Tuesday morning in March, he'd left his phone charging in the bathroom while he showered, and I'd picked it up intending to bring it to him. The screen lit up with a notification, and I saw the name that made my blood freeze. Brooke. My best friend since college, the maid of honor at the wedding Kyle and I had been planning for 8 months. The preview of her message read, "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you." My hands trembled as I unlocked his phone. His passcode was my birthday, which somehow made the betrayal more painful. The messages went back 4 months, filled with declarations of love, plans to be together, and explicit descriptions of encounters that had apparently been happening in my own apartment while I was at work. I stood there in the bathroom doorway, steam from Kyle's shower billowing around me, reading message after message that destroyed everything I'd believed about my life. They'd been sleeping together since November. They loved each other. They wanted to be together, but didn't know how to tell me. Brooke had written, "I feel terrible about Claire. But we can't help how we feel. She'll understand eventually." Kyle had responded, "She's so oblivious. Sometimes I think she suspects, but then she just smiles and asks about my day. It's almost sad." That word, oblivious, cut deeper than all the rest. I wasn't oblivious anymore. I was standing in my bathroom, reading proof that the 2 people I loved most in the world had been systematically betraying me for months. The shower turned off. I heard Kyle actually humming, as he reached for his towel. I quickly set his phone back on the counter and walked out, my mind racing, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might vomit. I called in sick to work, which was easy because I actually felt sick. Kyle left for his job at the architecture firm, kissing me on the forehead and telling me to rest, to feel better. The casual affection felt obscene now that I knew the truth. Once he was gone, I sat on our couch and tried to decide what to do. The obvious choice was confrontation. Scream, cry, throw his things out, call Brooke, and tell her exactly what I thought of her. But something stopped me. Maybe it was shock. Or maybe it was the calculating part of my brain that had always served me well in my career as a financial analyst. I'd built my professional life on analyzing data, finding patterns, making strategic decisions. Why should my personal life be any different? I made coffee and opened my laptop. Then I did what I did best. I researched, I planned, and I strategized. If Kyle and Brooke wanted to be together so badly, I decided, then I would let them. But they were going to get exactly what they deserved in the process. The first thing I did was document everything. I took photos of every message on Kyle's phone, every email, every piece of evidence of their affair. I uploaded it all to a secure cloud storage account they couldn't access. Then I created a detailed timeline of their relationship, noting dates, locations, and particularly damning quotes. I was methodical, thorough, treating it like a case I was building. Which, in a way, I was. Next, I did financial research. Kyle and I had been living together for 3 years, engaged for 8 months. We had a joint checking account for household expenses, though I'd kept most of my savings separate. A decision I was now profoundly grateful for. I reviewed our shared expenses, his credit card statements, bank records. What I found was illuminating. Kyle had been spending money on hotels, expensive dinners, gifts, all while claiming to be saving for our wedding. He'd taken out a personal loan last month for $15,000, telling me it was for a surprise wedding gift. The loan documents were in our shared files. I suspected that money had gone toward his affair with Brooke. I called Brooke that afternoon, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. "Hey," I said warmly. "I was thinking we should meet up this week to finalize the bridesmaid dress fittings. Are you free Thursday?" There was a pause, then Brooke's voice, slightly strained. "Thursday works. Are you okay? You sound weird." "Just tired," I lied. "Kyle and I were up late last night talking about wedding plans. You know how excited he gets." I could practically hear her wince through the phone. "Yeah, I know how he gets." We made plans to meet in our favorite cafe, The place where we'd spent countless hours over the past decade sharing secrets, supporting each other through breakups and job changes and family drama. The place where, apparently, she'd been lying to my face for 4 months. After hanging up, I made another call. To my cousin Aaron, who worked as a private investigator. "I need you to follow someone," I told him, explaining the situation in clinical, unemotional terms. "I want documentation of everywhere they go, everyone they meet, everything they do. Can you do that discreetly?" Aaron was silent for a moment, then said, "Claire, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I can do that. When do you want me to start?" "Immediately," I replied. "And Aaron, this stays between us. No one can know I'm aware of what's happening." Over the next 2 weeks, I played the role of oblivious fiancé perfectly. I smiled at Kyle over breakfast, discussed wedding plans with Brooke, acted excited about the future we were supposedly building together. It was exhausting and infuriating, but it was necessary. Meanwhile, Aaron was gathering evidence. Photos of Kyle and Brooke meeting at hotels, having intimate dinners, walking hand in hand through parks on the outskirts of the city where they thought no one would recognize them. He compiled everything into a comprehensive report that was devastating in its thoroughness. I also did some digging into Brooke's life and discovered something interesting. She'd been seeing someone else casually, a guy named Troy, who clearly thought they were in an exclusive relationship based on his frequent, affectionate social media posts that Brooke never acknowledged. Brooke was playing both Troy and Kyle, keeping her options open while destroying my relationship. That discovery gave me an idea. 2 weeks after finding the initial text message, I suggested to Kyle that we should set a firm wedding date. "We keep saying sometime in the fall, but we need to actually pick a date and send out save the dates," I said over dinner. Kyle shifted uncomfortably. "Are you sure we shouldn't wait a bit longer? Make sure we're really ready?" I looked at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Kyle, we've been together for 5 years. We've been engaged for 8 months. When will we be more ready?" He couldn't argue with that logic without revealing his real hesitation, that he was in love with someone else. So he agreed, and we set a date, October 15th, 7 months away. Then I called Brooke. "Kyle and I set a wedding date, October 15th, and I want to ask you something important." I paused dramatically. "Will you still be my maid of honor?" Brooke's voice was strained when she answered. "Of course, I'm honored, really." "Good," I said sweetly. "Because I can't imagine doing this without my best friend by my side." The guilt in her silence was almost palpable. Over the next month, I threw myself into wedding planning with manic enthusiasm. I booked an expensive venue, hired a photographer, ordered invitations, scheduled tastings with caterers. I involved Brooke in every decision, forcing her to help me plan a wedding to the man she was sleeping with. Every time she hesitated or looked uncomfortable, I'd squeeze her hand and say something like, "I'm so lucky to have you in my life. Some people never find a friend as loyal as you." The cruelty was subtle but deliberate. Kyle grew increasingly agitated as the wedding planning intensified. He started picking fights about small things, the color scheme, the guest list, the expense. "Do we really need such an elaborate wedding?" he asked one evening. "Maybe we should scale back, save money." "Kyle, this is our special day," I said, pouting slightly. "Don't you want it to be perfect? Don't you love me enough to give me the wedding I've always dreamed of?" It was emotional manipulation, using his guilt against him, and it worked beautifully. He couldn't argue without seeming like a terrible fiancé, so he just agreed to everything while growing more miserable by the day. Meanwhile, Aaron's surveillance continued. He documented at least 2 encounters per week, between Kyle and Brooke. Often at hotels, but sometimes at her apartment when they thought I'd be at work late. The evidence file grew larger, more damning. I also started making subtle changes to our joint finances. I stopped contributing as much to our shared account, instead moving money into my private savings. I paid off my credit cards and closed the ones that had Kyle as an authorized user. I was systematically separating my financial life from his, preparing for the inevitable divorce, but doing it so gradually he didn't notice. In May, 2 months after discovering the affair, I suggested we should do a couple's getaway with Brooke and Troy, the guy she'd been casually seeing. "Wouldn't it be fun?" I said to Kyle. Like a double date weekend. We could go to that cabin upstate you're always talking about. Kyle looked horrified. I don't think that's a good idea. We barely know Troy. Exactly. And Brooke is my best friend. I want to know the guy she's dating, unless you have some reason to dislike him. Kyle couldn't think of a reasonable objection, so he agreed. I called Brooke with the same suggestion, and she tried every excuse to decline before finally, reluctantly agreeing. The weekend was exquisitely uncomfortable for everyone except me. I watched Kyle and Brooke try desperately not to look at each other with longing, while maintaining the charade of being just friends. I watched Troy, oblivious to Brooke's divided attention, making sweet romantic gestures that she barely acknowledged. And I played the happy bride-to-be, constantly talking about wedding plans, making everyone complicit in the deception. One evening, after a few drinks, Troy pulled me aside. Can I ask you something? Does Brooke seem weird to you lately? I pretended to consider it. Maybe a little distant, but she's been so busy helping with my wedding planning. I'm probably overwhelming her with all the details. Troy looked relieved. That's probably it. I just worry sometimes that she's not really into this relationship. Give her time, I advised, feeling like the worst person in the world for lying to this genuinely nice man. She's probably just distracted with everything going on. On the drive home, Kyle was silent and tense. That was awful, he finally said. Why was it awful? I asked innocently. Everyone seemed to have a nice time. It was just uncomfortable, being around Brooke and her boyfriend while we're planning our wedding. I let the implication hang in the air. That being around Brooke made him uncomfortable for reasons he couldn't admit. Well, you'll have to get used to it, I said. She's my maid of honor. She'll be around a lot as the wedding gets closer. Kyle's hands tightened on the steering wheel, but he said nothing. In June, 3 months before the wedding, I implemented the next phase of my plan. I hired a wedding planner named Natalie, telling her I needed help managing all the details because I was so busy with work. What I really needed was a neutral third party who could verify all the arrangements and expenses. I also started casually mentioning to friends and family how stressful wedding planning was, how expensive everything had become, how Kyle seemed distant and unsupportive. I was laying groundwork, building a narrative that would matter later. The wedding expenses were mounting. I'd booked the most expensive venue in the city, hired premium vendors, ordered elaborate decorations. Everything was charged to Kyle's credit cards or paid from our joint account, which he was still contributing to heavily. I was systematically draining our shared resources on a wedding that would never happen. Kyle started to panic about the costs. Claire, this is getting out of hand. We've spent over $60,000 already. Don't worry, I said soothingly. My parents are contributing $20,000 and we have the savings. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event, Kyle. Don't you want it to be special? He couldn't argue without revealing that he didn't want to marry me at all. So the expenses continued. In July, I made an appointment with a couples therapist, suggesting to Kyle that we needed help with pre-wedding jitters and communication issues. He resisted initially, but finally agreed after I broke down in tears one evening, asking him if he still loved me, if he still wanted to marry me. Of course I do, he'd lied, holding me while I cried. Let's try the therapy, whatever helps you feel secure. The therapy sessions were illuminating. Our therapist, a perceptive woman named Dr. Harrison, immediately picked up on Kyle's ambivalence and Brooke's constant presence in our relationship dynamics. It's unusual, Dr. Harrison noted during our third session. How often you mention Brooke, Claire, and Kyle, you seem uncomfortable whenever her name comes up. Can you both talk about that dynamic? Kyle squirmed. I played confused. Brooke is my best friend. Is it weird that I talk about her? Not necessarily, Dr. Harrison said. But I'm curious about the boundaries in your friendship, especially as you're getting married. Over several sessions, Dr. Harrison gently probed the nature of our relationships, the health of our communication, the authenticity of our commitment. She never accused Kyle of anything, but her questions made him increasingly anxious. After our fifth session, he said, "Maybe we should stop going to therapy. I don't think it's helping." "Why not?" I asked. "Don't you want us to be as strong as possible before we get married?" He couldn't answer that honestly, so we kept going. In August, 1 month before the wedding, I visited Brooke's apartment unannounced. She answered the door in Kyle's college sweatshirt, the one I'd bought him years ago with his name on the sleeve. She saw me notice and went pale. "That's Kyle's shirt," I said, my voice carefully neutral. Brooke looked panicked. "He left it at my place after we all hung out last week. Remember? I was going to give it back to him. It was a terrible lie. We hadn't all been together the previous week." But I just smiled and said, "Oh right, well I'm glad you have it. He has so many clothes at home, he probably didn't even notice it was missing." I came inside and sat on her couch. "I wanted to talk to you about the wedding. About everything actually." Brooke looked like she might faint. "Okay? I've been thinking about how lucky I am," I said. "To have Kyle, to have you, to have this beautiful life. But sometimes I worry that I'm missing something, like everyone can see something I can't." Brooke was barely breathing. "What do you mean? Do you think Kyle loves me?" I asked, looking directly at her. "Do you think he's happy? Because sometimes I feel like he's somewhere else, like his heart isn't really in this." This was her opportunity to confess, to tell me the truth, to maybe salvage some fragment of our friendship through honesty. Instead, Brooke took my hand and looked me in the eyes. "Kyle absolutely loves you, Claire. You're perfect together. You're just having normal pre-wedding anxiety. Trust me, this is going to be the happiest day of your life." The ease with which she lied, the conviction in her voice, the way she squeezed my hand while wearing my fiancé's sweatshirt, it crystallized my resolve. These people deserved each other, and they were going to get exactly what they deserved. I left her apartment and called Aaron. "I need you to schedule a final surveillance push for this weekend. I want comprehensive documentation of everything they do." That weekend, while I was supposedly visiting my sister in Milwaukee, Aaron documented Kyle and Brooke spending the entire 2 days together. They went to dinner, walked through the park, spent Saturday night at a hotel. On Sunday morning, Aaron captured photos of them having breakfast at a cafe, looking like a couple completely in love. The photos were beautiful, in a devastating way. They looked happy, genuinely connected. It was the relationship they wanted, just with the wrong person in the wrong place. 3 weeks before the wedding, I called a meeting with Brooke, Kyle, and our wedding planner Natalie to finalize last-minute details. We met at the venue, walking through the space where our reception would theoretically take place. "Everything is coming together perfectly," Natalie said, reviewing her checklist. "The final payments are due this week. The total comes to $78,000, with your parents' contribution already received." Kyle's face went white. "78,000? Well, you wanted the best," I said sweetly. "And we're getting it. This is going to be the wedding everyone talks about for years." That evening, after Brooke left, Kyle tried one more time to delay the wedding. "Claire, maybe we should postpone, just for a few months. Give us time to save more money, to really be ready." I looked at him with tears in my eyes, real tears this time, because despite everything, part of me was grieving the relationship I'd thought we had. "Do you not want to marry me?" I asked. "Just tell me the truth. If you don't want this, say so now." This was his moment. This was when he could have been honest, could have admitted the affair, could have ended our relationship cleanly. Instead, he pulled me close and said, "Of course I want to marry you. I'm just stressed about money. We'll make it work. I love you." That lie was the final nail in the coffin of any sympathy I might have felt. 1 week before the wedding, I executed the final phase of my plan. I called a family meeting. My parents, my sister Emma, and my Aunt Joyce, who was like a second mother to me. I gathered them at my parents' house and said I had something important to discuss. "I need to cancel the wedding," I announced. The room erupted in shock and questions. I held up my hand for silence. "Kyle has been having an affair with Brooke for the past 6 months. I've known for 5 months. I've been documenting everything, and I have proof." I showed them Aaron's surveillance photos, the text messages, the timeline I'd created. My mother went pale. My father turned red with anger. Emma started crying. "Why didn't you tell us immediately?" my mother asked. "Why go through months of wedding planning?" "Because," I said calmly, "I wanted them to experience exactly what their betrayal felt like. Every time Kyle paid for wedding expenses, Every time Brooke helped me try on dresses, every time they had to smile and pretend while planning a wedding to the wrong people, I wanted them to feel the weight of what they'd done. Claire? That's... Emma trailed off, unsure if she should say cruel or brilliant. I've documented every expense Kyle incurred for this wedding. $78,000 charged primarily to his credit cards and our joint account, which he contributed to more heavily. Money he spent on a wedding he never intended to go through with because he was too cowardly to break up with me. I pulled out another document. I've also compiled evidence that he took out a $15,000 personal loan under false pretenses. He told the bank it was for home improvements, but spent it on his affair. That could be considered fraud. My father, who was a retired attorney, studied the documents with growing understanding. You're building a legal case. I'm protecting myself, I corrected. When I cancel this wedding, Kyle will likely try to blame me, to make himself the victim. He'll claim I was unstable or that I overreacted. I need everyone to know the truth. My mother was crying now. What about Brooke? I thought she was your closest friend. So did I said quietly. That's the betrayal that hurts most, honestly. Kyle's a cheater. Disappointing but not shocking given that we'd grown apart. But Brooke? She sat at this table dozens of times, ate meals with our family, cried on my shoulder about her own relationship problems, all while sleeping with my fiancé. That's a level of deception I didn't think she was capable of. I took a breath. Here's what's gonna happen. On October 15th, everyone will gather at the venue expecting a wedding. Instead, I'm going to tell the truth about why there isn't one. I'll display the evidence publicly. Everyone who came to celebrate our love will instead learn exactly who Kyle and Brooke really are. Claire, that's incredibly harsh, Aunt Joyce said gently. Yes, I agreed. It is. But so is sleeping with your best friend's fiancé for 6 months, so is lying to someone's face while planning their wedding. They earned this. My family agreed to support whatever I decided to do. The week before the wedding was surreal. I went through all the motions, final dress fitting, confirming vendor arrangements, greeting out-of-town relatives. Kyle was increasingly nervous, sensing something was wrong but unable to pinpoint what. Brooke avoided me as much as possible while still fulfilling her maid of honor duties. On October 14th, the day before the wedding, I packed my belongings from the apartment Kyle and I shared. I didn't take much, just my personal items, important documents, and things with sentimental value. I left a note on the kitchen counter. I've known about you and Brooke since March. I hope you two will be very happy together. You deserve each other. I stayed at my parents' house that night. My phone exploded with calls and texts from Kyle, from Brooke, frantic messages begging me to call back, to let them explain. I ignored them all. On the morning of October 15th, I woke early and got ready carefully. I did my hair and makeup perfectly, put on a simple white dress, not my wedding dress which I'd returned weeks ago without telling anyone, and drove to the venue. The venue was decorated exactly as I'd planned. White roses, candles, elegant table settings for 200 guests. Natalie had done a beautiful job, and I made sure to thank her and pay her final invoice in full. As guests began arriving, they were confused to see me greeting them in the lobby, rather than hidden away preparing for the ceremony. Kyle arrived, looking panicked, Brooke beside him, both of them trying to figure out what was happening. Claire, we need to talk, Kyle said desperately. Yes, we do, I agreed. In front of everyone. That was always the plan. At precisely 2 p.m., the time our wedding ceremony was supposed to begin, I walked to the front of the venue, where our officiant should have been standing. Instead, there was a large screen that Aaron had helped me set up. I took the microphone that would have been used for our vows. Thank you all for coming today, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. You're here because you were invited to celebrate the wedding of Kyle and Claire. Unfortunately, that wedding is not happening. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. 6 months ago, Kyle began an affair with my maid of honor Brooke. They fell in love. They'd been conducting their relationship behind my back while I planned this wedding, while I spent nearly $80,000 on this celebration. I clicked a remote and the screen behind me came to life. Images appeared, text messages, surveillance photos, a comprehensive timeline of their affair. I discovered their relationship in March, I continued. I've spent the past 6 months documenting their betrayal while they thought I was oblivious. Every wedding expense, every dress fitting, every cake tasting, I knew the truth the entire time. The room was completely silent except for gasps as people recognized Kyle and Brooke in the photos. I looked at them directly. Kyle, Brooke, you wanted to be together but didn't know how to tell me. You were cowards who chose deception over honesty. So, I made the choice for you. I clicked to the final slide, which showed a simple message. Congratulations to the happy couple. Kyle and Brooke, you deserve each other. Then I set down the microphone and walked out of the venue, leaving 200 shocked guests and 2 devastated cheaters behind me. The aftermath was explosive. My phone flooded with messages from friends and family expressing shock, support, and outrage on my behalf. Kyle sent dozens of texts begging me to talk to him, claiming he could explain that it wasn't what it looked like. Brooke sent a single message. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. But I'm so sorry. I blocked them both. The story spread through our social circles like wildfire. People took sides, most of them mine. Kyle's reputation in his professional network suffered. Several colleagues who'd been at the wedding distanced themselves from him. Brooke lost several friends who felt she'd crossed an unforgivable line. The financial consequences for Kyle were severe. He'd charged $78,000 to credit cards for a wedding that didn't happen, plus the $15,000 loan he'd misused. His credit was destroyed, and he faced months of payments for a celebration that had only served to expose his infidelity. I'd taken back my contributions to the joint account before closing it, leaving him with the full financial burden. My parents recovered their $20,000 contribution since I'd kept meticulous records, and we'd paid most vendors from Kyle's accounts per my careful planning. 2 weeks after the wedding, that wasn't. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Kyle and Brooke had actually gotten together. The affair they'd been conducting in secret was now their public relationship, and apparently, it wasn't going well. Without the thrill of secrecy and betrayal, they'd discovered they didn't actually like each other that much. Kyle resented Brooke for the financial and social ruin he blamed her for, conveniently forgetting his own agency in the affair. Brooke felt guilty about what they'd done, and couldn't move past it. They fought constantly, broke up, got back together, broke up again. 3 months after my canceled wedding, they were done completely. Kyle tried to reach out to me one more time, drunk dialing at midnight. You destroyed my life, he slurred. You are vindictive. Crazy. I hung up and blocked his new number. He destroyed his own life through his choices. I'd simply made sure those choices had consequences. 6 months after everything fell apart, I was sitting in my new apartment, a cozy 1-bedroom in a neighborhood I loved, when my doorbell rang. It was Brooke. She looked terrible, hollow-eyed, thin, exhausted. Can we talk? She asked. Please? Against my better judgment, I let her in. We sat on opposite ends of my couch, the physical distance representing the emotional chasm between us. I'm not here to make excuses, Brooke began. What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed you in the worst possible way. I just wanted you to know that I understand that now. Losing you, losing our friendship, it's been worse than anything else. I said nothing, letting her continue. Kyle and I are over. We were terrible together. It turns out a relationship built on betrayal isn't actually sustainable. Who knew? She laughed bitterly. I lost my best friend, most of my other friends, and ended up with nothing. Meanwhile, you're here, clearly doing well, probably happy without either of us in your life. I am, I confirmed. Happier than I've been in years, actually. Brooke nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know I don't deserve it, but I needed to tell you I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. And that I understand why you did what you did. We deserved it. She stood to leave, and I walked her to the door. Brooke, I said as she stepped into the hallway, I hope you find a way to forgive yourself and become someone better. But that journey doesn't include me. She nodded and left. I closed the door, leaned against it, and took a deep breath. Kyle had cheated with my best friend, so I'd let them get married, metaphorically at least. I'd let them have exactly what they wanted, the relationship they'd been building in secret, but I'd made sure they got it on my terms, in the most public and consequential way possible. Was it revenge? Absolutely. Was it harsh? Undoubtedly. But it was also justice, accountability, and the end of a chapter in my life that needed to close dramatically. And as I looked around my new apartment, at the life I was building on my own terms, I had no regrets. They deserved each other, and I deserved better. Sometimes the best revenge isn't stopping people from getting what they want. It's making sure they get exactly that, along with all the consequences that come with it.